Good morning, Mike. How you doing?
Doing great, Ryan. How are you?
Doing good. I'm excited for today's show because you've got a topic I think that a lot of people are very intrigued with from your past experience. And as a current entrepreneur, you've kind of got a very diverse background. I want to just, for our listeners' sake, can you go back to kind of your entryway into the digital marketing, even prior to your current company, and explain to us, where you started your career?
Sure. This goes back pretty far, so I'll make it really quick. Started in 1999. I was still in college, and I was back in those days. You built your own computer. You didn't buy a Dell, right? You built it. You bought you sourced all the different parts, and it was actually cheaper that way back then. So I was doing that. I was building my own computer just because it was a lot less expensive, and I'm a broke college student at the time. And I kept going to this website called bensbargains.net. Still exists today. And they were really well known back then for finding really good prices on computer parts. And I wondered, like, how do they make money? I just didn't know. So I used like an HTTP header redirector sniffer. That's a mouthful. To basically kind of watch all the links. And I saw one called Link Synergy. That one turned out to be owned by a company named Linkshare. And that's when I discovered affiliate marketing. So when I got my first job out of college, it was with Wyndham Vacation Ownership. I was in lead generation, and I launched an affiliate program there. Moved on to lastminutetravel.com, who was also based in Orlando, ran the affiliate program there. Got hired by a company named, well, actually, this is kind of an interesting story, and I'll make this quick. So I had always wanted to work at a company called Channel Intelligence here in Orlando. It was one of the few .coms here, and I kept applying, and never got a call back. And I was like, man, that kind of stinks. But oh well, let me go move on. I even played soccer. I think I mentioned to you before that I like to play soccer. I even played soccer on a co-ed team with the co-founder of Channel Intelligence's niece, and I kept on asking her, like, hey, can you get me in, right? And she's like, oh, well, they're not really hiring right now, and so on. So I kind of just let that go and just kept on my own path. Started this company with my brother, affiliatemanager.com. And I was up in New York at a conference. And the conference was at Chelsea Piers, if you're familiar with New York. And the hotel was, I think, the Hilton. And so they had a shuttle bus to take you from the Hilton to Chelsea Piers. And so here I am. I'm co-founder of this affiliate marketing agency. I need clients, right? That's why I'm there. So I take the opportunity that I have this captive audience kind of sitting on a bus. And so I get on the bus and I'm like, okay, let me go row by row. And I start talking to people. I'm like, hey, my name is Mike. This is what I
Love
do.
it.
What do you? Yeah, I mean, it's
They can't go. They literally can't go anywhere.
you can't go, well, and the mindset that I have whenever I go to any sort of conference, is everybody in the room wants to talk to me because I want to talk to everybody in the room, right? So I kind of take that mindset to get over the fear of talking to people I don't know and say, that's why they're here, right? Is to talk to me. So I took that approach on this bus, and I went row by row by row until I finally came across this person, this gentleman who was very cold. He did not seem to want to talk to me. So I said, hey, my name is Mike. This is what I do. What do you do? And he's like, I'm not supposed to be here. Anyway, three negative social cues later, I took it and I said, here's my card. Thanks for your time. If we ever see a way that we can work together, please let me know. And I kept along my way. About 8 months later, I get a phone call from this woman by the name Chris Nix, who is a fantastic recruiter in the Orlando area. And she says, hey, Mike, my name is Chris Nix. I work for a company named Channel Intelligence. 8 months ago on a bus in New York City, you met our CEO.
No way.
Yeah. And gave him your card, and he wants you to come work for us, right? So here I am, kind of at a crossroads. What do I do? So at that point, decided to kind of hand over the agency to my brother, who picked it up, and I went and I worked for Channel Intelligence. I thought it was a good opportunity to kind of expand my knowledge and such. And I'll burn through this part because I know this isn't the thing that's interesting to the people that are going to be listening, but it is kind of interesting to know, like, my first day of work there, I met a gentleman by the name of Kevin Weatherby, who's one of my best friends to this day. He also introduced me to my wife, Lisa, who I've been married to now for several years. And eventually Channel Intelligence got acquired by Google, which is, I think, what we're going to be talking mostly about today. But the way I think about it is just by taking that initiative on that bus, 2006, I think it was, I met, one of my best friends for life, the woman of my dreams, and got my dream job at Google just from going row by row on that bus.
I think that's a fantastic story. There's a quote that I love, and I can't remember who said it, but it was, "The world isn't full of strangers, just friends I haven't met yet." And you might get a couple cold shoulders, and that's why they call it cold calling, by the way, because it's not easy, and people don't always enjoy it.
Yeah, that's perfect. The world is full of friends that I just haven't met yet. I love it. I'm gonna have to use that.
Yeah, you definitely take that philosophy into heart, and I love it. So, for the listeners, well, let's get a little bit of a background on what exactly Channel Intelligence did, and affiliate manager. We can come back to your current gig because you're still doing that. But I want to what exactly did they do? What was the business? How did they make money? What was the kind of the size and the structure of the business, and what was your role there?
Sure. So as far as Channel Intelligence goes, they had two main sides of the business. The first side of the business was called Where to Buy. And basically, they helped manufacturers list on their site where consumers can purchase their products at retail stores. So if it's Samsung, as an example, and you wanted to buy the XYZ TV, it would list Best Buy, at that time, Circuit City, Amazon, and so on, and link you directly to that product on that retailer site. That was extremely difficult back in the day to do that unification process and do it at scale. So that was one side of the business. The other side of the business was basically feed syndication, so product feed syndication to other destinations. Things like the shopping.com feed or the Google shopping feed or the Amazon product ads, which no longer exists but did at the time, that feed, or the Bing feed, or whatever, or even affiliate feeds, things to that effect. So that's basically the two sides of business that Channel Intelligence did. It did have the lion's share of the business. The largest retailers, people like Best Buy, were some of the biggest clients, Office Max, Saks Fifth Avenue, HP, and so on. They had the largest share of the internet retailer top 50. As far as total revenues go, I think they were hitting around the $30 million mark, and we had about 150 employees, and we eventually, as I mentioned, sold to Google for $125 million.
Okay, so I want to dive into that because those are some big numbers according to the base of especially the fact that you got revenue, and then a lot of the traditional baby boomer business owners or traditional businesses, there's a multiple off of EBITDA or pre-tax income, which I want to kind of dive into because the software world and the online world is significantly different on valuations and opportunities that are able to be harvested. So before we jump into some of the logistics of the actual acquisition and the things that you kind of found, what was your role there, Mike? And how long did you work there? And just kind of give us a little bit of a debrief on that.
Sure. So my role was my first role was called publisher evangelist, and basically I was the liaison between companies like Google, Microsoft, and Amazon and Channel Intelligence. So it was a very cool job. I got to basically fly out to all of these campuses, see the Google campus, see the Amazon campus. So Amazon had this building on top of this hill in Seattle that used to be a hospital that they converted into an office. At that time, I don't know if they're still using it, but it was absolutely gorgeous. So yeah, that was my role initially, and then I eventually got into the account management. Then I ran our display marketing team, and then I eventually began to run that Where to Buy product that I mentioned earlier on. So that was my overall role with the company.
So I might be going back a couple of steps. So just for my own curiosity, like when you Googled, or like, and I know it's probably a lot different now, but like because of the way that the internet and the web is structured. But so would this be like a website where it's like almost like a traffic director, like where you're trying to actually go buy stuff? So now Google takes that place, or maybe I don't know if you can kind of visualize it a little bit better.
Yeah, are you talking about the where to buy solution?
Yeah, just like if when you're like, would you go directly to their site, or would it like pop up via when someone Googled or searched something?
No, where it stemmed from was basically, I want to go to Samsung and go to the authoritative source for product information, right? Like back then it was hard to tell between an LED and an LCD TV, right? Like you weren't sure if the information on these retailer sites was accurate, but you could always kind of trust the manufacturer information. So consumers would do searches for these TVs, let's say on Google, or they would go directly to Samsung.com and then find exactly the product that they wanted and say, okay, this is the TV that I want, or this is the toaster that I want, or whatever it was, right? Mm-hmm. This is what I want to buy. And then they would say, okay, now that I know this is the exact model number that I want, where can I buy it? And so there was a where to buy button. So you just click on it. It literally said where to buy.
Almost like a PayPal button, like a little thing right next to the actual product information.
Exactly. And there was a couple of different solutions. There was the integrated solution where basically you can have it as part of the web page, or it could be a JavaScript solution where you click on it and then a separate page pops up and has a list of all the retailers that sell that product, so you can find the one that you feel most comfortable with. Typically, it had the pricing associated with it as well, and then you would click on it and then land directly on that specific product that that's what you wanted to buy on that retailer site.
So interesting. I mean, I love it. So what was the time frame from when you started before the conversation started with the acquisition?
Oh, it was significant. I started in 2007 with Channel Intelligence, and we didn't start. We were acquired in 2013. Oh, wow. And the conversation started in 2012. And it was a real startup. I say this, and the people that work there know what I'm saying, and I have a feeling this is going to resonate with the people listening to this. I walked in every day, and I wasn't sure if I was going to get laid off or promoted, right? Like I was either going to get a promotion that day or let go, right? Like it was one of those two is kind of how I felt every single day. So that was really the feeling. And then there were times where there were some serious layoffs, and it was a scary proposition. But I seemed to make the cut every single time, and actually that'll come full circle here when we get into the acquisition talks in a little bit.
So, were you aware of kind of the funding structure then? So, I mean, when you say true startup, I mean, I think every entrepreneur has got that whole, we got payroll in 2 weeks.
Right.
But, were you guys backed by VCs? Did you have private money? Were you guys cash flowing yourself? What was the kind of the back end structure of the business?
Yeah, so it was originally seeded by Awita Ventures. I think they're out of Denver. And that was before, we'll call it before Mike. And then in 2006, I believe, ICG, Internet Capital Group, came in with a $15 million round of funding. I like to joke and say that $15 million bought me, because that's when they hired me the year after. But it bought a lot of people. That's when the company swelled from 100 to 150, I think, or more people. And it was actually pretty funny because there was an email that went around right after the acquisition as they were expanding the office and putting more offices in and such. And there was an email from our HR that said, hey, if you see somebody in the office that you don't recognize, please know that there's a lot of construction going on. And some of the older timer employees were like, I don't recognize anybody anymore.
Some of them are employees.
Yes, exactly. There's so many new people from this $15 million round of funding that I couldn't tell anybody from Adam. So Yeah.
So, and this is one of the, I think, the main differentiators between the Main Street traditional businesses and a lot of software or online companies that start with VC money is that there's a specific end game versus a lifestyle game. And I know there's a lot of different ways you can take that, but as you're working there, was the owner very transparent on what the end game was, or what were you guys marching towards? I mean, because to be acquired by Google, was that the goal? I guess it's kind of like the whole starting with the end in mind. I'm just kind of curious
Yeah.
on what your guys' internal conversations were like.
Yeah, so there definitely was a march towards acquisition. That was always the goal, and it was never hidden. We never really were talked about going public or just staying private. It was very much a march towards acquisition. And it was structured as such, where every employee had options. And so we weren't even referred to as employees. It was EOs, which is employee owners, because we each had shares in the company, and that was, of course, dependent upon your level within the company. But yet we would always talk about other acquisitions in the space, and they would basically say, if we were acquired for that same amount, this is how much everybody would get per share. So it was very, very clear. And I would say it was actually really interesting. We changed. We had a CEO, Rob White, who was absolutely fantastic from the inception of the company until about 2012. He then spun off a new company called MyList and went over to focus on that. He was very strong at product development. He was a former Microsoft, I believe, a former Microsoft product manager. So he went to go focus on that, and then the president of ICG came in to act as our CEO in 2012.
Oh wow!
Yeah, which just so happened to be pretty good timing, just for the whole acquisition. I don't think one had to do with the other, but that gentleman, when he came in to be our CEO, he did provide some focus. We had basically a product board with 6 products that we offered. He walked in and crossed off 3, and actually I think he crossed off 4 and said, "This is where we live. We focus on these 2 things, which is the where to buy and the feed syndication. Nothing else matters, right? So focus on these 2 things." And we did, and I think this is where you were going with your question. We very much aligned ourselves with Google Shopping. I don't know if we thought that they would come in and buy us, but I can talk a little bit about why they did, because they did share some of that with us. But we did align ourselves. I think we were probably thinking an agency would come in and say, okay, these guys are the experts at Google Shopping. We need them to round out our services.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was more, actually, it ended up being Google that came in. And to talk a little bit about that, when they acquired us, they were very, very kind, and we should certainly talk about how that process went, because I think it's pretty interesting and people should know. But when they sat us all down in a room, they talked about it, and they said, the reason why we're coming to you guys is we analyzed it, and anybody that Channel Intelligence touched, anybody that came through you guys, your return was something like 6x that of anybody else, the non-Channel Intelligence managed people. And so Google had an internal goal to hit I don't know the exact numbers, so I'm going to just use examples, but to go from a $1 billion run rate on Google Shopping to, let's say, a $5 billion run rate on Google Shopping. So from that perspective, they were looking at Channel Intelligence to help them make that happen quicker. And so that's where the multiple came in. I know you were talking about EBITDA a little bit earlier. Our EBITDA was probably horrible, but that wasn't what we were going for. We were looking for a strategic acquisition. We ended up getting one. And so we ended up getting a 4x on gross, and not including EBITDA at all in the equation, because Google wasn't looking at it from I'm going to increase my bottom line. We're a rounding error to Google, right? That 125 million.
Well, and this is where I find it, and I want to dive into some of the actual conversations and meetings and questions during the due diligence process. But to kind of round out this scenario, it's so interesting because the software world, it's possible in a lot of the online acquisitions. Over the history since the web, it's been a lot of strategic acquisitions, which is why it's like a multiple of revenue, and it's so different than the cash flow multiples of the main street. And I want to go back to when you were valuing, because you said the employees had options. You've got a goal in mind, and you've got obviously a method to your valuation. So, what was your exposure into, or how did you get your shares, and how do they value the company? Because if everybody's marching towards that dollar amount, because again, if you're going to do a meeting with your company, you're going to want everybody to know exactly how much they'd be worth based on the industry or the things that are going on. So how did you guys go about doing that?
Yeah, so honestly, I was a little naive back in the day, right? It was my first it was my first big job, let's just call it that way. And so I actually didn't really think about that at that time. And we were almost letting them just dictate and tell us what it was going to end up being. Obviously, we kind of trusted that whatever they were going to try to get the biggest amount for the shares as possible. Mm-hmm. So and of course, we couldn't really influence that in any way, shape, or form. So that said, I one thing that I think mattered a lot was the way that preferred stock and common stock, we as EOs had common stock, whereas anybody who invested in the company obviously had preferred stock. So they got paid out first, and then we got paid out second. That all said, it was fine. Everybody got paid out. Google does a really good job, I think, and they're very, very fair. If I ever have the opportunity to be acquired by Google again, I would certainly welcome that opportunity.
Well, and it's such that's why I love this story, because I think when everybody laughs about a software company, it's like, oh yeah, the goal is to get acquired by Google, Facebook, or Amazon, right? I mean, it's the typical thing that you just see even the Silicon Valley shows just joke around about. So. I think it's very ballsy to start with that in mind, and to kind of be bouncing back and forth between the traditional and the online world, where there's some rules that are out there. If you talk to an investment banker, they're going to look at your cash flow. They're going to apply all of these normal valuation methodologies and who could potentially acquire you. And one of them even goes up to size, where you're not someone that's over 20 times the size is not going to potentially buy you, because their rate of return on your cash flow is not going to be worth the effort. However, I think that changes dramatically with strategic acquisitions, because like you had mentioned, the speed to market. So, when you guys were going about doing this, and you probably had benchmarks in the industry of what was going on. Was there? I think the biggest difference, and I don't know if I'm articulating this correctly, but it's you went in with a specific business problem that you were trying to solve, and that you knew other people were going to be able to acquire you to go to market faster. Is that kind of in a nutshell?
Yeah, very much so. We definitely said we are going to align ourselves with the Google Shopping problem, and the problem of how do I get the best return on Google Shopping. And so that was definitely the problem that that new CEO that came in 2012 set us out to focus on. Said we are going to be the best at this, and I think he just knew that if we were the best at that, somebody would come knocking. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he thought it would be Google, but he definitely thought it was going to be somebody. And so for us to, again, as to your point, strategically help them get from 1 billion to 5 billion, if we accelerated that by double, right? The 120, I think it was 125 million. 125 million they paid for channel intelligence becomes almost negligible. And then when you throw on top of the fact that Google is such a profitable company, they get taxed on that money. That 125 million, honestly, is probably closer to 70 million, right? That if they didn't spend it, so to speak. So I think that there's a bunch of different things at play. Plus, I think they look at it as an employee acquisition strategy, which might be a good segue into talking to how they actually handled that aspect of it, which was, I thought, pretty interesting.
Yeah, so let's jump into it then, because I mean, I don't know what your exposure was to the actual valuation conversations, but I'd be interested if you have any, like, I mean, how do they get to 125 billion? Because if I'm sitting, I mean, obviously this is just more in fantasy world, but like, okay, if you can get Google $5 billion more dollars, why wouldn't you charge $1 billion? I mean, I know that sounds
Right.
ridiculous, but it's kind of the whole strategy of the return on investment. So how do you land on a number? When you're doing multiples of gross. Did you hear anything about how they actually came to that?
Yeah, I did hear this. This is complete hearsay,
Mm-hmm.
but I did hear that basically it was based off of a 4x of gross. That's the number that they came to. From what I hear on the negotiations, they were actually pretty simple. Google came with an offer. We declined because it wasn't a strong enough offer. And basically said, well, we're on a really good path. We're on an upward trajectory right now. Please feel free to come back to us with another offer, but we're just going to continue as is. And then Google came in with that newer, higher offer of the 125 million. And at that point, I think it was that 4x multiple, 4x of gross that they were looking for. And I know it had to do also with the people that invested in the company. Obviously, they wanted to achieve a certain level of return on their investment. So
Got it.
I
Yeah.
think that's basically where it came from.
So then, as Google comes in, I'm assuming after the offer happens, then the due diligence comes in. What was that like? What was the whole, kind of walk us through the whole journey?
Yeah, it was actually really interesting from a due diligence standpoint. I think the financial stuff is pretty self-explanatory. They obviously wanted to dive into our numbers, contracts. They were a little unhappy with how many different variations of the contracts there
Mm-hmm.
were. At which, quite honestly, I don't know what else they could have expected. It wasn't like we were in a position to, dictate terms to Best Buy, right? We were the smart,
Yeah.
So I don't know what they expected there, but I do know that they obviously would have preferred a more templated approach that they could have then, been able to easily identify, because they literally had to go through every single contract to make sure that there wasn't anything that they were taking on that they couldn't agree to, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
As the greater entity of.
What were your contracts like? I'm just curious because that recurring revenue is a big deal for a lot of businesses. And were they annual contracts or monthly, or what did it look like?
Yeah, it was definitely annual contracts.
Cool. Cool. Cool.
Yeah. So they of course reviewed every single contract. That obviously was a huge burden on our legal team. We had a fantastic lawyer. His name is Matt Huggins. He's based out of Orlando now as well. I actually use him now for my current company, just because it's great to be able to know that you have an attorney that's basically worked with Google, right?
Yep. Yep.
So that's obviously great. Anyway, so there was obviously that piece. From the services side of it, it was actually really interesting. Like, this is how the employee conversation went. So Google came in and said, okay, now that we've agreed on these number terms, we need to worry about the employee staying after this acquisition, especially since they were requiring us to move to Pittsburgh. Okay,
Oh, really?
and that changed. That actually changed a little bit, but initially it was required that we move to Pittsburgh. So Google came in and they went to the CEO of Channel Intelligence and they said, okay, if you guys had to pare down to 2 employees, you're going to fire everybody else except for 2. Who would those 2 be? I was not one of those 2 people, but these 2 gentlemen were. And Google said, okay, they both have to say yes to A, working with Google, and B, moving to Pittsburgh in order for this acquisition to move forward.
Interesting.
So Google approaches them. I can only imagine the offer that they made to those 2 employees that made it very well worth their while to uproot and from Orlando, Florida to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Both of them said yes. So the deal obviously moved forward to where Google said, okay, we need your next 10. Who's your next 10 employees that if you had to pare down, that you would only keep those? And so I was part of those next 10. They flew all 10 of us and our spouses up to Pittsburgh. They took us around the office. They wined and dined us, I would say, a little bit, and showed us the really cool sides of Pittsburgh. They had real estate agents drive us around and show us the different neighborhoods that our families can move into, things to that effect, which I thought was very, very cool. There was one hiccup that I always find a little bit funny, as they basically arranged for us to talk to current Googlers that were based in that office, in the Pittsburgh office, which was phenomenal, by the way. It was in a former Nabisco factory. Yeah, so they have these huge, I think they're called urns, basically where they made all the dough and all this stuff. That stuff was still in there. It was very Pittsburgh themed. It was very, very cool office. Anyway, so I'm sitting in this meeting with this Googler, and I did my research beforehand, and I was looking up all the different people that I was talking to, and this particular woman had something like, she was a PhD. She had like dozens of patents under her name. I mean, just like intimidating, right? Like,
no kidding.
And ridiculously intelligent woman, right? And so we're talking, and she's kind of like, she's saying things, I'm saying things, and I kind of see the look of disappointment on her face as she's talking to me. Like I said, I can pick up on social cues, and I feel like she's slightly disappointed in me, and like this whole acquisition, like, oh man, why are we hiring these guys, And then finally, she says a couple things, and I say, wait a second. Do you think I'm a developer?
Oh, too funny.
And she says, you're not? And I said, no, I'm in sales. And she's like, oh, that changes everything.
I bet she had a look of relief on her face.
Yes. She was actually extremely happy after that point with how much I knew about the technology stack.
The bar got set way different then.
Yes, it was completely different. So I mean, again, walking in as intimidated as I was, and then to see this look of disappointment, to finally figure out that we weren't on the same page walking in. We obviously had a whole different group of developers that they were talking to, but me being on the sales side, I think she was initially she was expecting for me to be a developer. So anyway, that's how that went. And then there weren't really interviews. Now that said, out of the company of about 150. So, like I said, about 12 really got full-time offers. So, a very small minority of the actual company got offers to come full-time onto Google. And initially, I think Google did a bad job of giving hope to people. I think they were trying to set expectations to say that, it's very rare that if you didn't get an offer initially to come on full-time, that you would get an offer. But I think that kind of dashed the hope of a lot of people, and maybe made them start looking elsewhere, or just didn't make them feel good about it. When in reality, obviously, if you were doing a fantastic job, Google wanted to extend. They just wanted to make sure that initially they got the core on board, and then as time went on, they would identify other people that would come on board, right, over the long term. So I think another 20 to 30 eventually got offers to stay on board with Google.
So what does that do? How did that specifically affect the working day-to-day and the culture and normal business operations?
I think everybody was very excited. Obviously, we all felt like we were getting called home by the mothership, right? We were all just super excited to be acquired by Google. Everybody gets to put, Google on their resume, because even if they didn't get the full-time offer like the initial 12 did, or the 20 to 30 did, the way that Google structured it was stay bonuses, right? So if you different people got different levels of stay bonuses. Some people, very few actually got let go right there and then, like at the time of acquisition. They weren't extended at all. Some of them got 3 month. Some of them got to stay on for 3 months with a bonus to stay for 3 months. Some of them 6 months with a bonus to stay at 6 months. Some of them a year with a bonus to stay on for a year. So everybody was excited, because they basically were going to get this pay They got to say they worked for Google. If you stayed on, you got a Google employee number. So you were literally in their system. You had the opportunity to prove yourself to grow and potentially get a job there. Again, I think they didn't do a great job of fostering that, but still, people were excited overall to be working with Google. They came in and kind of Google-fied the channel intelligence office down. It was in Celebration, Florida, just outside of Orlando. So they did some things there to kind of make us feel more at home. Google's known for providing lunch for employees, as an example. So they started to cater lunch for us on a daily basis, which I thought was very cool of them.
That's cool.
Yeah, they really tried to make us feel like we were part of Google, even though we were still based in the Orlando office before we had to eventually move to one of the remote offices.
What was the time span from the offer to like that whole where you're now part of the mothership?
So I'm not sure exactly when the offer came in. I would say we were made aware of it around November, and the deal closed in February. My guess is it was about 4 to 6 months before we found out about it. So that's a complete guess, but overall it happened pretty quickly.
So do you think that I'm just kind of guessing from an outsider's perspective? I mean, with your guys' employee owners structure, like how did they distribute shares? And I mean, do you think that had a crucial piece in everybody being on the same page?
I'll say yes and no. It got to the point, I think, over years and years and years. Cause, I was there for 6 years before the acquisition, and then 4 years after. And then, there were some people that were there since 2000, 2001. So I think at some point, the shares became almost imaginary, if I may, because there was no hard value to them. And then if you left the company, you had an option to buy them. You had to actually execute your options if you left the company. And so I think it was, there was a lot of unknown, right, if I would, around there. That said, you did have this feeling of ownership, and Channel Intelligence did a fantastic job, I think, of empowering employees, of telling them, you are an owner of this, hold each other accountable because of it. And so on. So I think, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, but I think in the end it worked out well.
So, I mean, as in terms of like an ESOP or something like that, I mean, I know there's a lot of different rules and regulations around the ESOPs because you're actually within a retirement plan, but, how did they go about like vesting? Was it kind of up to the owner's discretion on how much they gave specific employees? I mean, what was the fairness behind it?
Yeah, there were certain levels. So, level 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. And at each level, especially coming in, you would get a compensation package that included options that would vest over 4 years. And then as your performance was measured over the years, you could also potentially get additional shares based off of performance.
Got it. I think it's just intriguing because there's a lot of conversations around like key executives, key employees with a lot of business. How do you keep them? How do you keep them interested without giving away a ton of equity, or if there's phantoms? Like there's just a lot of stuff around that. I think that hearing what works and what doesn't work is beneficial to everybody. So you stayed there for 4 years. Did I catch that?
Yes.
What was some of the? I mean, if you were to kind of sum up the experience in a couple of sentences, what did they do really well, and what did you see that became aware to you that you wish would have gone differently?
Yeah, so that's I mean, there's a lot I think in this question that I think people, again, especially if you're getting acquired either by Google or anybody else, that you should know. So there was some unknowns. So something like where you get placed in the company, and I feel like this was negotiable, and I wish I would have known that to begin with. But Google also has obviously levels that they put you in at. levels 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. And where they place you, I feel like has a large impact on what you're able to do at the new company. I thankfully I was placed in at a fairly high level. I think at the level I was at, technically in their employee handbook, I could open an office on behalf of Google. So that part was, I think that part was good. But if I would have known that was something that was being considered, I would have asked and I would have pushed, obviously, for something a little bit more, something a little bit higher, and so on. So I think that was something that they could have given. They did not negotiate on salary at all, and I pushed pretty hard on that. However, bonuses were, so I mentioned the stay bonuses. People that were in that original 10 to 12 got offered stay bonuses over a 4-year period. That's why I stayed for the 4 years, because they were they were good, right? So they were definitely incentives for us to stay over the 4-year period. Those were negotiable. The stock options were not negotiable. That's something that went really well. When they offered a stock, it was stock based off of the value of the current stock, and back then I think it was before the split, and they were in the $400 range, and then now they've split, and each is in the $900 range. So that was obviously something that was a little bit life changing for us.
That's fantastic. I mean, what do you still keep in contact with a lot of the individuals that you were working with?
Yeah, that's probably the best thing that came out of it was the networking, and that was definitely my intention going in. I while I was going to give Google my 100% all of the time, I knew that I'm more of an entrepreneurial spirit, and that was a little bit tough. I'll say that.
Working for the big, huge.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that us entrepreneurs want is that we want to feel like we're making an impact, and without giving numbers, because I'm not sure if I can. But I literally was in business development sales, and in 1 year, after the Google acquisition, I sold more than Channel Intelligence had acquired in the 13 years prior. Right?
Oh my gosh.
So, so it was significant. Yet, the impact on Google's bottom line was, the smallest of decimal points of percentages. Right? So, talk about accomplishing something, but also being a little bit disheartened because you're kind of realizing that this isn't I'm not changing anybody's life, right?
Right.
So, and I think that's part of what us entrepreneurs like to do is we like to change people's lives, and I wasn't. My impact was not measurable, so that was tough.
I totally. I mean, you want a purpose, right? I mean, that's. And I know for the lack of time, I want to be conscious of our cutoff, but you still own your company, and I don't want to pass it up, because you had mentioned right at the beginning of the interview that you just let your brother run it, and I know you still own it, and you're now back doing that. So maybe we could save it for a different show, but what have you got? I mean, you've got a significant sized business that you continuously own, and you left that for a long period of time and still own it, and now we're back running it. So maybe the best question I'm trying to think of, if I were to ask one question, what would it be? It'd be, what did you learn throughout this entire experience that you're applying to your current business, and where you want to go with the future of that business?
Wow.
Hey, by the way, we got a minute and a half, so ready, go.
Right. Yeah. So, wow. What did I learn that would apply? I think I would say two things. One, employees are everything, absolutely everything. You have to have a solid team around you, and I think one of the things I absolutely loved at working with Google was the people. Everybody there was just top notch, and it elevated you. So it's certainly something that I've brought with me back here, and everybody here I feel is top notch and pushes each other in a very positive way. So that's definitely something that I would say. And the other thing I would say is there are a few people that do internet marketing right.
Yeah.
I got a vision into that as I was there, and I was just astounded at especially some of these large agencies that just don't do this well. And so I really am taking away that there's an opportunity, and I would encourage people to take a second look at what their agencies are doing. I was pretty amazed at how poorly things were being run, and it was thin ice to walk on, right? You don't want to throw an agency under the bus, but you got to protect the people that are paying money, right, for click costs and such. So that was always a very thin ice to walk on. But yeah, those are probably the two things that I would say. And then, of course, execution. I would say that one thing everybody at Google does well is execute. Everybody does that well. And so I definitely watched how they executed and learned from that.
Well, and with your previous experience of an entire team of people that were starting with the end in mind, I mean, is there with affiliatemanager.com and some of the things that you're doing, what is the the main problem that you're solving for a potential synergy down the road? I mean, is there one thing that you said that the CEO crossed off 4 of the 6, same thing that Jobs did when he went back to Apple? I mean, what's that one thing that you guys are kind of striving to change?
Sure. So we are performance-based marketing, right? We want to reward. What we love about this is it's an everybody wins scenario. The only way that this works is if everybody wins in it. If the retailer or client is making sales, then our affiliates are making money, or influencers are making money, and we're making money. So it's one of those. That's actually what I love the most about what it is that we do. It's we can change. We focus on medium-sized businesses. We don't actually want the Best Buys of the world. We want to make an impact, and we want like the owner of the company on the other side saying, "You guys changed my business, and you guys changed my life." So cool. That's what we're focused on.
Was it weird coming back after being gone for so long? And did you kind of manage from a distance? Because I mean, I think the biggest challenge, and again, like I said, I'll keep it for another possible episode, but I mean, for you to be able to step back and have a self-sustaining business, I think a lot of owners struggle with that. So I mean, was it weird jumping back in? Did your brother get upset or?
No, well, actually, and not to put a somber note, but my brother passed away actually not too long ago. Yeah, very young of cancer. He was 30. Yeah, I mean, it was ridiculous. Yeah. So, luckily, actually, my former manager at Google left the company, and she went to go travel the world for a year. And she came back, and just when we were kind of going through these struggles with my brother, he was in the hospital, receiving chemotherapy. And I asked her, I said, "Hey, are you looking?" And she worked at Google Affiliate Network previously. Yeah. So, and I feel like I had the longest job interview ever with her because she was, again, who I reported to there. And she was just absolutely fantastic. Like, I thought if I was ever going to, we just aligned completely off of our philosophies and how we approach things and how we take a positive approach. And so I said, "Is this something interesting to you?" And she said, "Absolutely." And we worked out a deal, and now she basically runs everything from an operational standpoint, and I step back in to handle things from a strategic and sales standpoint. So things while obviously I would change things if I could, from a business perspective, it's worked out well.
That's awesome. It's a sad story, but I mean the ability to kind of pull through it like that it's good to hear. What is the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you, Mike?
You can just email me at mike@affiliatemanager.com. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Thank you very much for coming on the show and giving us a peer into what it's like on the Google front. I think it's a cool story.
Thank you, Ryan, for having me on.